Speak out, get silenced. That's the message to Senzo Mchunu and Malusi Gigaba as the ANC moves to discipline them. Add to that Parliament's Mkwanazi inquiry gaining steam, and the cracks inside the ruling party are beginning to widen. Stay tuned to find out why. Fam, I just want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Pace Car Rental. Use promo code SMWX and make sure you show Pace some love as they're showing this channel some love. Now, let's get into the episode. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, or the Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh experience. If you're new around here, I'm Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, and in today's episode, I'm going to be exploring the Senzo Mchunu and Malusi Gigaba disciplinary fracas, as well as Parliament's recent Ad Hoc Committee meeting, where some progress was made towards the terms of reference. So, Senzo Mchunu and Malusi Gigaba have incurred the wrath of the ANC for some statements that they made recently, and it's important to look into this because I think it sheds light on the ANC's succession question, but also just politics in general and the GNU. So what did Senzo Mchunu get into trouble about? I want you to take a look at what he said recently at the unveiling of struggle stalwart Noguhamba Nyawo's tombstone or unveiling in northern KZN. He said, if we don't win municipalities in the upcoming local government elections next year, come the national government elections, we will be history. Hectic. And it's clear that ANC leaders are beginning to sound the alarm. This comes in the context of regional elections, which are happening in the ANC. These regional elections are really important because they build up to the provincial elections and then the national elections next year. But by the time you get to the provincial elections, often the regional dynamics have already determined who will be the provincial chairperson, and then provinces decide who will lead the party. So pay attention to these regional dynamics. And of course, KZN is going to be an absolutely central province in the ANC's succession race, largely because that's where a large portion of ANC membership comes from, but also because that's where the ANC is bleeding the most support. And that's where Mchunu made these statements. Both Mchunu and Gigaba have ties to ANC, KZN leadership. Now, Mchunu's also alluding to the next election. So the build up to that is already beginning. And he's saying, if we lose more municipalities there's going to be a slippery slope to the ANC becoming, as he puts it, history. Now, why does he say that? Especially in KZN. If you look at the electoral dynamics in the last election, if we had a local election and MK did just as well as they did in the last election, it would be an absolute decimation for the ANC. Now, somehow the ANC has been able to hang on to provincial leadership via its government of provincial unity in KZN. But if they start losing the grip of key municipalities, the mayorship, etc., that's going to have profound implications for the KwaZulu-Natal ANC, because more and more power is going to slip out of ANC hands. Also, the MK will then have the opportunity to leverage their municipal power to maybe convince the ANC into a coalition at the provincial level. So effectively, Mchunu's looking towards KZN and saying, look, if it's an electoral bloodbath like it was last time, it's going to be terrible for the ANC because it's going to have profound knock-on effects for the next election. Now, let's take a look at what former Minister of Finance and current ANC NEC member Malusi Gigaba said, because both Mchunu and Gigaba are in hot water with the ANC, and we'll get into what the ANC has said in response later. But I want you to take a look at the first clip of an interview that Malusi Gigaba recently did with Times Live and Lizega Tandwa, where he said that the ANC had been forced into an unnecessary coalition, particularly with the DA. Have a look.
I am disappointed because the effect of what has happened is that the ANC has been forced into an unnecessary coalition with elements which, some of which I believe we ought not to have gone into a coalition.
And he further elaborates on what these elements are into which this unnecessarily coalition falls. Let's have a look at his view on the GNU and the DA.
I've always held the view that the GNU should have excluded the DA. I still hold that view even now.
And many
I don't think that there is anything that justifies why we are working with them. I think we would work better with other political organizations, including EFF, than the Democratic Alliance.
And Gigaba went even further because Lizega Tandwa asked him whether he thinks this relationship with the DA will hurt the ANC in the future for the local government elections, and he said this.
This relationship is hurting us now. Forget about the next elections. It's hurting us now. Our legitimacy among those who aspire for democratic change, for fundamental change, the way the ANC is perceived, it gives arsenal to the opponents of the ANC to project the ANC as having shifted to the right.
So a number of interesting things there and some patterns we can observe. Firstly, interesting, two leaders linked to KZN sounding a warning, trying to correct the course of the ANC. We've also got this rift that seems to be emerging between the parliamentary caucus, which is something Gigaba also mentioned, and the national executive. So parliamentary leaders are not in support of this coalition with the DA, whereas the party itself outside of parliament obviously was the author of this GNU arrangement with 10 parties. Of course, this all comes against the backdrop of the Mkhwanazi allegations, into which Mchunu is himself implicated, and this crisis of confidence in the ANC, which has been precipitated by those bombshell allegations from Mkhwanazi. Also interesting to see Gigaba taking a more prominent role in the media after receiving his PhD. Is that a sign that he is reinserting himself into the leadership conversation for the ANC? Time will tell. Now, the ANC suddenly acted extremely decisively on these two leaders who just spoke up. Mchunu wasn't even filmed, I believe, just reported, and Gigaba went on this podcast. The ANC did not take kindly to this. Let's have a look at what they said. We're going to bring up a graphic now. For immediate release, the ANC has noted with serious concern and disapproval the recent conduct and public statements made by Comrade Malusi Gigaba and Comrade Senzo Mchunu. And the statement continues that they note with serious concern and disapproval the flagrant violation, they say, of ANC internal communications protocols. They also say that these comrades were deliberately, or what they said amounted to deliberately decampaigning the ANC. Let's take a step back. I mean, this seems like a disproportionate response to ANC leaders sharing their views. I mean, what Mchunu said is pretty much true, isn't it? Like, if the ANC loses more municipalities, it's going to be rough for them. And I mean, is it really wrong for an ANC leader to talk about how they disagree with the GNU? You know, we had Tony Ngeni on this podcast. We also had Bladen Zimande on this. We've had many. We've had Nomvula Mokonyane on this podcast, etc. You see, if you try to constrain ANC leaders in such a divisive move too much, then you're going to have a very disgruntled ANC caucus in Parliament and in the NEC. So, I mean, I think it's actually probably a good thing for ANC voters to know that some of their leaders don't agree with this GNU arrangement, because it would have irked and disturbed a lot of ANC supporters, voters, members, for them to go into coalition with the DA. That's just obvious. But the ANC goes even further. Let's read, because there's some seriously strong language in the statement. It continues, and we'll bring up another graphic here. The ANC categorically states that this is a revolutionary movement guided by democratic centralism, etc., etc. No comrade, regardless of their history or standing, is above the requirements of organizational discipline. Comrades are casting aspersions on the character and unity of the ANC. portraying the organization as divided, incoherent, and collapsing. Side comment. If it's true, everyone. These actions serve only the strategic agenda of a counter-revolution. And I'll stop there. I mean, you would think these, you know what I find funny? When an ANC leader is accused of or even found guilty of corruption, we don't get a statement like this. Like, this is counter-revolutionary, casting aspersions on the unity. But a few ANC leaders go on a podcast and make a statement, and suddenly the intensity of 1,000 burning suns is brought to bear on them. It does seem interesting and something of an overreaction, and probably suggests that there is a bit more discord and disunity bubbling under the surface of the ANC, which the Office of the Secretary General, the communications infrastructure of the party is trying to nip in the bud unless it boils over. So they're not only trying to send a message to Mchunu, but also and Gigaba, but also all members, don't just go around speaking, don't just go around being guests on SMWX, etc., because we're trying to keep the ship steady. Of course, I profoundly disagree with that, and all ANC leaders should come on SMWX. There are a few in the top 7 we haven't had. Obviously, President Ramaphosa. Would be great for him to come on SMWX, don't you agree? Gwede Mantashe, the chairperson. I think Mantashe should definitely come on SMWX. But let's hope they get sanctioned. Not in that sense. Let's hope they get allowed to come on the podcast. So, I mean, this statement was harsher than most corruption accusations. Is the SG flexing his muscle here? And, what does this mean for the next election? Of course, in the build-up to the 2027 ANC conference, the central question will be, should we have sided with the DA or should we not have? And I think the grouping which comes out with the majority on that debate will win the leadership of the ANC in future. ANC just feels like it's in a bit of disarray at the moment, rocked by the Mkwanazi allegations. The economy is not growing well. We saw yet another increase in unemployment last week. The president's national dialogue has become a laughingstock, quite frankly. And there's just no energy, there's no hope, there's no vavavoom to this ANC administration, ANC-led coalition anymore. ANC reminds me of the famous World War I French Marshal Frederick Foch, who remarked at the Battle of Marnay, "My center is giving way, my flank is retreating, but the situation is excellent. I am attacking." So, having said that, of course, it is also quite important to reflect on the Mkwanazi situation, and I want to give you an update there because we've been following that very closely. And as all of this ANC internal instability is taking place, of course, we also have the Mkhwanazi Ad Hoc Committee in Parliament. I just want to take a step back. Where is this Judicial Commission of Inquiry, everyone? Mkwanazi's allegations were in early July. President Ramaphosa came to the nation and said, I am going to urgently appoint a commission of inquiry which will stampede and sprint into inquiring into this. It's like 6 weeks later and the commission hasn't even sat yet. We're going into September soon, people. So once again, those of us who sounded the alarm and said this is all going to be a big delay and this idea that we're going to get a report within 3 months of Ramaphosa's announcement, it's already been a month and the thing hasn't even started. Anyway, at least Parliament's Ad Hoc Committee has started. I did a video on how the latest meeting was very disappointing, with people struggling to go on Zoom and they couldn't find their laptops and then they were muted and then 1 hour passed and then people were struggling to find the documents and it was just too much. It was like trying to teach your grandmother how to use WhatsApp. And so we had that disappointing meeting, but there's been a new meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee. And I just want to say, I think we must ban Zoom meetings in Parliament now, once and for all. Because literally this meeting was 7 hours. probably 2 to 3 hours was people unmuting themselves and people not being able to be heard and people's connections dropping. And it's actually becoming farcical at this point. So join me. Can we sign a petition or something? This is my petition for MPs to go back to sit in person, because this Zoom thing is just not working anymore. And furthermore, just on the preliminaries of this committee meeting, the chairperson should read out the register for the public to know who's in the meeting, who's early, who's late. Because, for example, Julius Malema started speaking 3 hours into the meeting. He said he had been there all along, but there was no way for the public to know that because everyone's on Zoom, and there was no public register read out. There was just a call for apologies, but if you didn't put in apologies, then you wouldn't have been read out. So I think the chair, or at least when things are in person, we'd be able to see who's there. But if there's ever another Zoom meeting, we need a public register when the meeting starts. Who's early, who's late, and who gave apologies, but also who's absent, who didn't give apologies. Now, there were a number of important issues. Now, remember, we're still trying to bed down the terms of reference for this committee. Bit of background: Mkhwanazi releases a plane load of explosive allegations in early July. Ramaphosa says there's going to be a commission, and Parliament says they're going to investigate. So this is the parliamentary investigation, or at least one of them. And in order to have this ad hoc or special committee that's going to look into these allegations that Mkhwanazi made, you have to have a document that guides how that committee is going to do this, and that's called the terms of reference of the committee. So the committee is sitting to map out those terms of reference. So it's a big question. It's an important question because that document will guide what the public eventually gets to know or not know. So the first big question in this terms of reference debate, when they finally got the documents working, was secrecy. So to what extent can a parliamentary committee receive documents that are classified, maybe even top secret or something like that, and can they deliberate on them publicly? Now, the MK party, and I'm going to spare you the video clips because you're going to be looking at people scrolling through documents for hours. The MK party effectively made an intervention that there should be a new protocol crafted and created for the committee to make sure that considerations of secrecy don't supersede the public interest and the need for the public to know. Effectively, there was a long debate, and what Parliament said was, no, there's already an existing protocol. We don't need to develop a new one, but we need to make sure that we balance accountability with the need not to divulge state secrets. Now, on that topic, and I think this is going to be a very important debate, probably for the rest of this year, we do need to investigate exactly what the position legally is around secrecy, because what we cannot allow is for members of the police, members of the security establishment to try and hide behind secrecy when the public needs to get to the bottom of the situation. And I want to take you to some key legal provisions there because it's important that the public keeps its eye on the prize here. So, of course, you've got the Constitution, which has various provisions which guarantee transparency in the execution of public duties, also access to information, principles of cooperative government and governance, so that Parliament and the security establishment should work together. But then you've also got the legislation around access to information, and this is really key. So if we look at the Promotion of Access to Information Act, and particularly at Section 46, here we have a very, very key provision, which is about the disclosure of documents that could be seen as classified. And classified has various gradations within it. It can be from top secret to less sensitive. Now, Section 46 says, despite any other provision of this Act, the information officer of a public body must grant a request for access to a record, so let's put that in simple terms. So someone who's holding on to information saying that it's classified must grant a request if someone makes a request for that information. If the disclosure of the record would reveal evidence of 1. a substantial contravention of or failure to comply with the law. So let's stop there. So a person who's holding on to this information as secret must divulge it if a request is made if the revelation of that evidence or that record reveals a substantial contravention of or a failure to comply with the law. And we know that Mkhwanazi's allegations suggest that there have been massive failures to comply with the law in law enforcement, the executive, etc., the intelligence architecture. So that is very important. And so secrecy can't be used as a shield to prevent people from inquiring into unlawfulness. And then the second thing is, so the disclosure of the record would be permitted also if, number 2, an imminent and serious public safety or in the event of an imminent or serious public safety or environmental risk. And the public interest in the disclosure of the record clearly outweighs the harm contemplated in the provision. So at any time, you've got to contemplate whether the public interest outweighs the secrecy impulse. So in all of these commissions, these kind of considerations need to be taken seriously. And if documents need to be made available, there's no reason why these committees should not get those documents unless there's some other reason. But if it reveals unlawfulness and the public interest outweighs the secrecy concern, then those documents should be made available. We actually didn't get a lot of that legal analysis in the committee, but that's what should be governing the committee in the first place. Okay, so that was a big debate that was settled. And then there was a further conversation, which was about, should there be monthly reports to Parliament or should there not be? Eventually, the committee said, no, we don't need to report monthly. We just need to do so relatively regularly. And the whole idea is that this is supposed to be done quite quickly anyway. The DA tried to expand the scope of the committee to say it needed to also deal with human rights abuses, and then they tried to smuggle in something about unions and police unions and whether they should be investigated or what role they're playing in this rot. But effectively, it was felt that would widen the ambit of the committee too much. Members said, okay, of course, we may need to look into unions if necessary, but it's not a key leg on which the inquiry stands. And then finally, there was a conversation about, yes, this took 7 hours, everyone. There was a conversation about whether there should be an independent advocate who should be an evidence leader, etc. And there was a strong feeling, quite different to the last meeting, that yes, an independent legal resource is needed and Parliament will have to go about appointing that person, etc. So we probably will have an external advocate, evidence leader, and then, of course, those giving evidence may well come with their own legal representatives as well. So that's the latest on the Mkwanazi Commission. And of course, this forms the backdrop of a major political headache for the ANC, because the question is, what will be revealed about their government, particularly in the first Ramaphosa term and under the GNU, that either lends credence to or disputes this idea that they are infiltrated by criminal syndicates. By the way, I just wanted to say Action SA reached out to us to say their submissions weren't late. Rather, it was the committee that didn't incorporate their submissions into the actual document at the last meeting. So that's it for the SMWX analysis. But the conversation doesn't stop here. I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe. We're pushing for 300,000 subscribers, and you can help us get there. And if you're on the move, remember to catch every episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. This is where South Africa thinks aloud, and you're part of it. Aye.